quite a lot of what I heard tonight is new to me. I must congratulate PJ for digging all this up. And I think he's doing a lot of valuable work. But being a lawyer and an academic, I feel somehow responsible for what's going on. The people who are supposed to have set up this system. Anyway, I'm not a political scientist. I'm a lawyer and an academic. And the good thing about Singapore is that it's not difficult to be an expert. There's so few of us. The moment we write one article on it, we become the expert on it. That's how I acquired that title. I think PJ wanted me to say a word about the two regimes of detention without trial in Singapore. There are actually two laws which are being used. One is the famous Internal Security Act. I need to say nothing more about that. There is a second one which is less well known. Although now it will probably be more well known because of the discussion in the press recently. It is called the Criminal Law Temporary Provisions Act. It is the longest temporary provisions we have. It predates a lot of our permanent acts. It needs to be renewed every 5 years, but it has been since 1959-60. Okay, so you divide the number of years by 5 years, and you get the number of times it has been renewed. Okay, my concern as an academic about detention without trial, it's not the focus is not quite so much on this, but on the accountability of the power. I am actually, I'll tell you what I am really an expert in, which is the criminal law. And how I came to be interested in detention without trial is because the whole idea that the government can detain you without trial makes a mockery of the whole of the criminal law. Because the idea of criminal law is that if you breach the criminal law, you are charged, you are tried, and then you are sentenced and detained. This extraordinary power does away with all that. Right? So I began to look at it because what's the point of me spending my life studying the criminal law when this other power, which can be used to short circuit the whole thing. So that's how I came to study this. Right? My own generation, I thought Mannheim's generation, it was not quite Cold Store, I was a bit too young here. It was actually Spectrum in the 80s. I think some of you are here who are more qualified to speak about it than I was. And very similar themes emerged. Very similar kinds of accusations, very similar kinds of doubts about whether or not they should have been detained. Okay. I think what I can best do is, this afternoon I was thinking about what to say. I came across, this must be an editorial in the Straits Times of 15 November 2013. Tough law still relevant. It doesn't have an attribution, so I assume it is an editorial in the Straits Times. And it's interesting how the manner in which this kind of power is publicly justified. Right? It is so it's so unsatisfying. Okay, just you should read it yourself, right? But I just pick up some of the strands of justification which emerge from this editorial. It says, well, it starts off very well. The first paragraph says, a law that permits this sort of power must be justified, and it must be rigorously debated and discussed, right? And then it goes on to try to justify why it should still exist, right? Especially in the light of the detention of the 4 match fixers, the sort of people who are likely to destroy the country. When I read about it, I said, "Are you kidding me?" Match fixers. Anyway, it goes on, right? So the first point we can pick up is this line. It goes on to say that in the 50s there was this law and disorder situation that was going on in Singapore. Gangsters were running around, so we needed this power, right? But now the article says things are much better. But it says it is reasonable to argue that this happy state of affairs is itself a result of the deterrent capability of laws, including the Criminal Law Temporary Provisions Act. Right? So we are enjoying the good law and order now, so says this strand of argument, because we have this act. And this, at the end, this extraordinary power, the moment we take it out, we're going to sink back into the 50s. Right? So in what sense is it going to be temporary? Right? If the argument is that we need it in order to prevent it from slipping, from backsliding, then it will always be needed. There will never be a time when it will never not be needed. Okay? So it doesn't work. Right? And it goes on. And it says, and a few other things, but I just wanted to pick up this one here. Malaysia's experience is instructive. Okay, what is this? The repeal of its emergency ordinance in 2011 was followed by such a spike in violent crime that it was found necessary to restore detention provisions in its laws. In 2011, Malaysia revoked its detention, but not entirely, just Malaysia has several detention laws like we do here, but it revoked one of them. And immediately there was, it is said, a spike in crime. And the police blamed the absence of this law, and that's why they are reintroducing now here. And that's why in Singapore we shouldn't follow we should learn from the Malaysians here. Right? I don't know how much you know about Malaysia. I'm a Malaysian. And there are when a criminologist looks at this, there's so much that's wrong about it. He says the spike in violent crime. Where are the statistics here? What year are you comparing? What kind of crime? Okay, and how do we not know? How do we know or not know whether this spike in crime was engineered in order to create a situation which would argue for the return of the detention laws? And to just transfer an experience from Malaysia over into Singapore just like that, it seems to be quite alarming here, because in no other context would the government of Singapore simply follow Malaysia. And then it goes on, right? The elaborate precautions taken against abuse in the administration of the Criminal Law Temporary Provisions Act should set hearts at rest. What are these elaborate provisions? Right? We know that the legislation says that there has to be this committee. There is this committee which reviews the detentions, but we know nothing else. I'm not even sure whether the membership of these committees are public. It may be in some gazette somewhere. Okay, but how they function, what they do, we don't know. But we can imagine. We can imagine. So we can ask questions like, does this supervisory body, which exists both for the Criminal Law Temporary Provisions Act and the Internal Security Act, there are different boards, right? Now, they are probably wise old men, maybe a judge, maybe a senior accountant, maybe whoever it is, and they sit there and they receive a file given to them by the police. In the case of the Criminal Law Temporary Provisions Act, in the case of the Internal Security Act, it's by the Internal Security Department. So the file is completely constructed by that agency concerned, which has recommended detention here. And when you read the file, what do you expect to see here? Evidence against the rest? No, of course not there. Because they are, let's put it this way, imagine that you are being tried for a crime, and the only person allowed to speak and to give evidence is the prosecutor. So what are these members of the advisory board going to do? What can they do? Do they have their own policemen to counter-check the facts? No. They have to accept whatever documents come up to them. Okay, so I'm afraid my heart is not at rest here. And it goes on, the more regular release of detention statistics will help. It will help, but it doesn't tell us whether those detentions are justified. Right? And it says, in the final analysis, the very fact that the act is temporary, being dependent on parliamentary renewal every 5 years, is a safeguard of the highest order. Parliamentary scrutiny obliges the authorities to show why they are justified in using a powerful law instead of becoming dependent on it out of habit. Whoever wrote this, I think, is well aware of the issues at hand. Right? But indeed, how do we know? How can we know whether or not it is being used in justified circumstances or just out of habit when it is not necessary to do so? In what way does the parliamentary scrutiny every 5 years help you? Okay, one of our 4 match fixes. On what earthly justification can it be said that the normal processes of the criminal law cannot be used against them? If the normal processes of the criminal law cannot handle something like 4 match fixes, I think I should change my specialization and become a commercial lawyer instead.
Thank you, Professor Hor.